The reason I'm making this video is I have a decent amount of people that come to me for coaching. They're either coming to me from Olympic style recurve to barebow or from compound to barebow, or they're brand new to barebow altogether, and they have no idea where to start or have no idea where the differences are in the actual setup of the equipment, how you actually shoot the shot, and how to adjust your sight because you don't have one. So that's why I'm making this video, and I'm going to cover all those basic things that I believe every single barebow archer needs to be doing and needs to know, or at least have this in their back pocket in case they need to use any of this information. So we'll start with the very basic stuff, and that is the actual setup of the bow itself. Obviously, this isn't a barebow, this is a barebow. This fits in the very specific class style of barebow archery, where you can use an ILF riser, you can use recurve limbs, and you can have weights as well as a plunger and a rest. All of that must pass through a 12.2 centimeter ring. I will have links in the description below where you can get one of those rings, or where you can actually 3D print one if you have a 3D printer like I do. And also all of the other gear that I'm using in this video, I will have links in the description below. So the bow has to pass through that ring. That's what classifies it as a barebow. You can also not use any sort of aiming aid or aiming reference, but we do string walk and we use the point of our arrow to actually aim. If you don't know how to string walk, I will have a link in the description below and a card at the top up there, how to actually string walk and how to get your crawls, that's what they're called, the different distances that you may encounter shooting, like 10, 15, 20, and so on in meters or yards, whichever you choose. Now, the basic differences in the actual setup of the bow itself, outside of the parameters of the class style, is the actual tiller split. That's the biggest thing and the biggest difference that you'll see in difference from Olympic style recurve to barebow, or from compound to barebow. Compound, you set your tiller even, if you even check that. And Olympic style recurve, normally you have shorter on the bottom, between 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in that range. We would call that standard tiller split, where it's shorter on the bottom. So you would use a bow square, you'd measure here against the base of your limb straight out to the actual string and check your actual tiller measurement. Now, on regular Olympic style recurve, like I said, it's shorter. On barebow, you should at least be using even tiller, if not bigger on the bottom, what we would reference as negative tiller. So if I were to make a recommendation to you and where to start, the difference in the top to the bottom would be roughly 1/8 of an inch bigger on the bottom to start. Most people start with even, but every single person that I've coached and worked with, I've brought them up at least to 1/8 of an inch, if not all the way up to 1/4 of an inch bigger on the bottom, negative tiller, and the bow aims and holds much better for them. The reason we do that, in a quick nutshell, is because when we're pulling back the string, we're not pulling it back in the center of the bow, we're pulling it down below center, overloading the bottom limb, and therefore when you make the tiller bigger at brace height, it deloads the bottom limb so it's even when you're at full draw, making it more comfortable for you to aim, as well as more comfortable on your fingers on the string. The next thing in regards to actual setup preliminarily is the nocking point. Now, keep in mind that the difference of barebow compared to other style bows is that the nocking point is extremely variable depending upon the actual crawl you are using. So meaning if I'm using a 10-meter crawl versus a 50-meter crawl, my required nocking point to have the perfect arrow flight with no porpoising, no up and down flight of the arrow, is vastly different between the two distances. So if you're going to be always shooting one distance, say 20 yards, you may want to optimize your nocking point for that. Or if you're always shooting 50 meters, optimize it for that. If you're shooting for field archery, you may want to experiment with having it towards the longer range of the shooting or the middle range of the shooting, so that way it's evenly messed up throughout the entire course, or you favor towards the longer distance because maybe that's where you can get more points. So just know that it's always very different for the different crawl, and it's really hard to make good solid recommendations. However, a decent starting point is to take the top of your nock. So when your nock is clicked on the string, the top of the nock, above where it's just touching the rest here, you want it about 1/2 of an inch above center. That's generally a pretty safe and very easy to start with starting point. It'll get you within the ballpark, and you're not going to be completely screwing up your fletchings and all sorts of other things along the process. Really, the only way to verify that is to actually shoot bare shafts and check your stuff manually, adjust your nocking points, and do so accordingly to make that arrow fly like a dart. instead of porpoising downrange like a dolphin. Now, as far as brace height's concerned, that's pretty standard for ILF style recurves, and you know, you might want to just run with the standard brace height or something that you might be comfortable with if you're shooting Olympic style recurve. And if you're a compound shooter or new to this, just check your manual that the bow came with. For a 70-inch bow, just start with somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5 centimeters, 8 3/4 to 8 7/8 inches. That's a great starting point. Now, one other thing to mention in the preliminary setup of the actual bow is the arrow. Now, the arrow, you can use your standard length that you would use, just a couple inches longer than where it would sit on the plunger, or an inch longer, or, you know, somewhere in that neighborhood. Standard arrow length, you can do that just fine. But note that you're on average going to need about 100 to 150 spine stiffer arrow than you normally would out of an Olympic style recurve. And if you reference the spine charts when you're saying the actual draw length, the draw weight versus the arrow length, and you look at that chart and you pick which arrow you want, it might say, oh, you need about a 600 or 650 spine arrow, but I promise you, you're gonna need at least 100 spine, if not 150 spine stiffer, and I've got a set of 500s here today. Now, the reason that happens is because when I draw the bow back, when I'm crawling very deep distances, you'll see here that I'm actually way, way below the arrow itself. And it looks like I'm actually pulling back the arrow less than if I drew back right here, which that is in fact true. The literal draw length, the actual distance that the arrow is pulled back, is shorter. However, because I am pulling back the string down here, like this, far below the arrow, if I really over-exaggerate, what is actually happening is you are shortly and minorly, for a very temporary period of time, from the time it takes from this distance for the string to travel to actually push the arrow, you're dry firing the bow. Therefore, the limbs are accelerating forward with no resistance and mass of the arrow pushing back on it. And then by the time the string catches up to the arrow and starts pushing the arrow, the string is moving so fast it hammers the back of that arrow, and it actually makes it start whipping vertically, and then it starts bending horizontally. And because of this crazy influence on the actual arrow itself, it breaks down the arrow spine a little bit quicker than you could expect. So that's why it's a great idea to start with about 100 to 150 spine stiffer of an arrow. I give that range because every arrow manufacturer is different. They might go from 1250 to 1000, or 1000 to 900, or 1000 to 850, or, you know, they vary. They're not always every 100, they're not always every 50. So make a best guess to go about 100 to 150 stiffer than what an arrow chart would recommend. Now, if you plan on going up in draw weight, or possibly growing, you know, in height and getting longer arms, you may want to consider that 150 range to be the minimum that you'd start with, because then you can grow into those arrows in the future. So that's really the basic principles in regards to the actual basics of the bow itself to get yourself on the right foot as far as the actual raw equipment is concerned. But I'm going to cover a couple more basics here in regards to actual adjustment of the arrow landing on the target downrange. We're going to adjust crawl, and we're also going to adjust plunger tension to manipulate and move that arrow in impact point downrange. Now, something to really make sure you're doing is to use string alignment. If you're coming from compound, you may not be familiar with this because you'd use a peep sight. Or if you're using Olympic style recurve, you're probably consistent or familiar with the actual string alignment. String alignment is a blurry, fuzzy, in your peripheral vision in relation to the arrow when you're at full draw. So if I'm focused on the target, I'll use my arrow point as my reference to put the arrow in the center of the target, and then I use that blur, of the fuzzy blur of the string, and I put it in the same place every time. As a beginner, as a new barebow shooter, it's not super important where it goes, just put it in the same place. If the string is blurry and fuzzy and you put it on the edge of the riser, that's cool. If you put it on the edge of the arrow here, the edge of it, and use that as a reference point, that's cool too. Just do it the same consistent amount of time. If you're coming from compound, this is affecting your left to right. Same thing with recurve. If you're adjusting your string alignment and it's moving left and right, that's like letting your peep sight move left and right relative to your housing when at full draw. So just put it in the same place every single time and you'll have a consistent left to right impact point. Now, the vertical consistency is all about your crawl, how far down you come from the string, how consistent you are in that, how consistent your anchor is. So you got to make sure those are solid too. So we're going to talk about that first, and we're going to adjust the vertical impact point on the target. So what I'm going to do here, I'm here at 20 yards. I've got a camera down range so you can see where the arrows are going as well up close. And I'm just going to pick a random crawl point about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches down from the string. We're going to go about 2 inches down to start and go from there. You see I hit a little high. I'm going to do the same crawl again, and hopefully I get a similar result downrange. Okay, so you can see both of those arrows hit high. So the way you adjust your arrow impact point is not to aim in different places. I'm not going to hold my point low. I could do that and still have arrows hitting in the middle, but I can adjust my sight, my crawl, to have the same result and still being able to aim in the middle. Now the way I do that is the opposite that you would move your sight on a compound or a recurve. The reason you do that is you're moving the front sight on an actual sight. Now we're moving our rear sight, so it's opposite. If I'm hitting high, I want the arrows to go down. If I want the arrows to go down, I move down further on the actual string. I crawl deeper, so I move the opposite. Normally, with a sight, you'd move it up to bring the arrows in the middle, but here we're moving our back sight, so I'm going to crawl down further. So I'm going to crawl down 2 notches on my tab, and do the same exact thing and aim in the middle again. That was a little bit too much, so I'm going to pick 1/2 of a notch, 1 notch, instead of the 2 full ones like I did before, so half of that. That one I was holding a little bit low, but at least now I'm in the 10 ring. And now I'm right in the middle. So it's very simple. So if I was hitting high, I crawled further down. I hit too low then, so I went back about halfway in between the two, and I got the arrows landing in the middle. So that covers up and down. Now let's talk about left and right. Let's pretend that my bow is set up like this, and this is the first time that you're seeing me shoot arrows. I'm gonna go get those and shoot a couple of arrows to begin with, and I'm gonna show you how to adjust your left and right without changing where you're aiming, changing your string alignment, and you're just adjusting your equipment to make the arrow still land in the middle. So let's pretend that you didn't see me shoot those other arrows to find my crawl, but now that I know my crawl, I'm gonna use that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shoot an arrow, and I may not hit in the center left to right. Actually, I hit a little low too. I made a mistake there on my anchor point. I've been experimenting with new stuff, but that's a different story. Shoot one more arrow, and you'll see I'll still be to the right. All right, so you see that both of those arrows are to the right. If you think of a plunger and what it does and how it works, is it rests on the side of the arrow. So if you're right or left-handed, just think of the actual plunger in this manner. It's supporting the side of the arrow from the side that the plunger is installed on, right? It's touching here. It's a spring-loaded mechanism. And so if I'm hitting to the right, if I increase the tension of the spring, it's going to push it further this direction. So because it's on the right side of my arrow, I increase the tension, it's going to push it left. If I decrease the tension, it's going to hit further to the right. Very, very simple. So what I would do now, in my opinion, because my string alignment's good, my arrow tune is good, all I'm going to do is give a little bit of tension increase on the actual plunger. I went up about almost a full turn there, maybe a little bit more than that. And now I'm going to aim in the middle again using the same crawl, and we'll see it'll start to bring over the arrow into the middle. Getting a little closer, I'm going to add a little more. There I am, back in the middle. Shoot one more. All right, so it's really that simple. So just think of the actual arrow being supported by the plunger. If this is the arrow, plunger's on this side. If I increase tension, pushes it to the left. If I decrease tension, it moves it to the right. Now that's not always the right way to do it. Sometimes the actual tune of the bow can be off, your center shot can be off, many different things can be off, but if you did your job with proper preliminarily setting up the bow, getting the string alignment or the center shot set, and you're using roughly the correct spined arrow, generally speaking, your arrow is going to hit really, really close to the actual middle of the bail. And so if I'm increasing tension, it's going to move that arrow within reason a decent amount without moving the plunger a crazy amount. If your arrow's not tuned very well, if your string alignment's way off, making these changes on the plunger tension can really affect things, and it may not be the ideal way to do it, but it's definitely the first way that I approach things because I'd rather leave my string alignment consistently the same place, and I'd rather not aim off and just move the plunger to adjust to get that arrow hitting in the middle. I've not found it to be a problem, at least as of yet. However, caveat, I definitely haven't competed at any level outside of just a local club level, basically. I just haven't had time to practice, and if I'm not practicing, I'm just not going to go to an event. It's just the moral of the story there. But I do believe that it's not wrong so much so that I wouldn't recommend it. It's just a much easier place to start with in regards to moving your arrows left and right, at least to be consistent. Now, if your string alignment's way over there or way over here and you're hitting off differently, you may want to adjust that and move that string alignment closer to the arrow. Again, the string alignment is the same as crawling. It's your rear sight. So you're going to want to move it the direction you want the arrow to go, not follow the arrow like you would with a sight. So if the arrow is hitting to the right, I would actually move my string alignment to the left. If you think of the arrow itself just being a guide for this, the arrow's pointing at the target, right? And if I take my string alignment and I move it right, my arrow's going to point further to the left. If I move my string alignment left, the arrow's going to point further to the right. If I move the arrow up, crawling down, the arrow hit lower. If I crawl up higher, that moves the knock down, I hit higher. So you can kind of think of it from that way, and I'm sure because I've said it now 15 different ways, you're extremely confused. Just go back and watch the beginning part of the video and ignore my little bit of ramble there at the end. I can't help myself, and I always overteach and give a little bit too much information from time to time, so I'm sorry about that. Hopefully this really helped get you started off on the right foot, somewhere that is a good baseline to start. That'll kind of demystify barebow just a little bit to make things easier for you. Like I've said, I've had a lot of people coming to me for coaching lately, especially for barebow, and some people just don't know what they're doing, even though they've been doing it for a couple of years by now. They miss the very basics of how to crawl, how to adjust the impact point, how to adjust the plunger to move the impacts left and right, even something as simple as tiller. I've had people come to me with Olympic-style recurve tiller and can't figure out why the bow feels so heavy to aim in the middle despite having no weight at all on their bow. I adjust their tiller and I put a 20-ounce weight on their bow, and it feels much easier when they have that negative bigger on the bottom tiller. So if this video helped you and you liked it and you got value out of it, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell down below. Genuinely, that helps this channel grow, and it will notify you when I upload new content. Like I said, I always try to produce relevant content to help make you a better archer, no matter the archery style you're using. Hey, if you like this video, consider sharing it. Genuinely, that helps this channel grow. I don't operate any other social media, and I rely on you to help spread the word about the channel. I produce all this content for archers around the world to enjoy for free, so if you wouldn't mind, please do consider supporting this channel. There's many different links in the description below. I can't thank my supporters enough. Without you, I wouldn't be able to produce this content, at least not to this level, so thanks.